shortly. And we do actually have 3 other speakers besides me, so we're going to go ahead and try to transition to each person in a very quick and smooth manner here. So I just want to introduce to you really quickly our National Tribal Water Council members. You guys raise your hand. And there's Chauncey over here. The folks behind me are also part of the National Tribal Water Council. So there's 9 members here with us present today. We are actually running our meeting concurrently downstairs in the King Chapel room. So we've been here yesterday and today. So we're happy to be here, and we're going to go ahead and start our session. First of all, we're going to do a quick short video of the Water Council. Then after that, we're going to transition to hearing from the National Tribal Water Council chairman, Kim Morton. And then after that will be Nancy Schultz, and after that will be Scott Hauser. And then after that we'll be back to Kim to close us out. Thank you very much.
I didn't know there was a video. One sec, we just have to hook up the audio for the video.
I think you should, all you have to do is switch your speaker settings.
Oh. To which one?
To,
no, there's only 2 options.
what the heck?
Oh. One sec, sorry guys. She didn't tell me this needs to be plugged in. Where to?
Anywhere.
It's always important for us to stay on top of rulemaking around the Clean Water Act, whether it's the definition of waters of the United States, whether it's revised rulemaking around the 401 certification, whether it's interpreting TAS in such a way that it streamlines the process for the tribe to take it on. That's one constant priority of the council. On the flip side, our priorities are also on the ground. How to support tribes in implementing the water programs, whether it's do we have the resources that we need, but other things too, like trainings, like guidance, to be able to talk about tribal success stories and to hold up the examples of what tribal programs have been able to accomplish.
Some of the challenges that a tribal utility faces are new and old contaminants, whether it's emerging contaminants like PFAS or microplastics. The National Tribal Water Council acts as a lead with the PFAS working group, which is a working group that has looked at the effects of PFAS in Indian country, trying to scope just how big that impact is, as well as looking at treatment techniques that can be applied to remediate some of those issues. And then all put life cycle to disposal, to make sure it's not reintroduced into the atmosphere, and trying to take a holistic view to protect tribal communities, water, and other resources. Razor and traditional styles are raised in the client house, and one of the first things, even though I was the first one to receive a degree in college, I remember going back home and my grandmother was talking to me in our language, and next thing I know, she hit me over the head and said I was becoming stupid. So that was a big learning point in my life about traditional values, and you know, no matter how much we learn in this world, we need to always keep our best foot in the traditional values and traditional knowledge. So I've always used that learning point to carry me forward whenever I work with tribal people, that we cannot respond to the issues that arise in Alaska regarding environmental issues, whether they be air, natural resources, water, subsistence resources, without receiving the voice and the input from our traditional leaders, and the ones with traditional knowledge.
The core mission of the National Tribal Water Council has always been the protection of our sacred waters that are integrated into our identity of who we are. Water is alive, it's part of our physical and spiritual being, and it surrounds us. We at the Water Council take that mission with the highest respect and the highest honor.
It is very important for tribes to work together and use those relationships with each other to not only address some of these issues moving forward, but make sure that they have one voice that carries the policymakers and the like to continue to affect change when it comes to water-related issues. We can help each other, and I think that will be the role in the future, is that we will provide blueprint for other tribes to follow. We've got so many tribes with so many issues, and yet we have a common issue, and that we're suffering from environmental changes, climate changes, and the trees may be different, the fish may be different, the wetlands may be different, but when it comes down to it, we're all suffering, and we all need avenues of support and mouthpieces to be able to advocate for the tribes, and I believe the National Tribal Water Council does that.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and I'm glad to see some old friends out in the audience and some new friends that have joined us. Again, my name is Ken Norton, and I am the chairman of the National Tribal Water Council, and I'm also a member of the RTOC from Region 9 and have participated in other forums. Our purpose today is to highlight the Water Council and some initiatives that are affecting tribes across the nation. And with that said, I'd like to get into our presentation. Thank you. As we said, and as Mervyn highlighted, water is central to our identity. It's spiritual to our heart, and it brings us a connection to our surroundings. And it bestows on organizations, not just the water councils, but each of us within our hearts, to embrace water and protect it with the highest regard. The National Tribal Water Council, again, advocates for tribes in the best and Alaska Native villages in protecting their waters and their resources connected to waters. I would like to just kind of give a brief overview. In the early of the Biden administration, President Biden issued Executive Order 13990 that required all federal agencies to review the previous administration's draconian actions on environmental. And it required agencies such as EPA to review executive orders and other rulemaking. Under that, the agencies would review to see if these rules had a detriment to the environment and human health. As a result, EPA prompted EPA to review the waters of the United States and the 401 certification rule. But however, in May of this year, the Supreme Court made a decision called the Sackett Rule, and that has changed again the complexity of the waters of the United States. And why is that important? Because all Clean Water Act regulatory activities, most Clean Water Act regulatory activities, are tied to what is defined a water of the United States. And tribal waters, state waters are mainly protected through the federal government under that mechanism, under permitting actions. Next slide, please. The Biden administration also is, as Mervyn said yesterday, we look at actions, not just words, but actions. The actions of the Biden administration in closing the regulatory gaps in Indian country under the baseline water quality standards and the reserved treaty rights initiative provides direct enhancement of tribal sovereignty and self-determination. The Water Council also works with the Office of Water, in regards to its 4-year action plan. In this action plan, it aligns with many of the Water Council's goals, such as looking for higher funding for infrastructure for drinking water and clean water, and also with the baseline water quality standards and these other initiatives of the 401 certifications that have direct implications in Indian country. We also work hand in hand with the Office of the American Indian Environmental Office, and I'd like to recognize Kenneth Martin, who's with us today, who is the director of AIEO. Thank you. I'm just not going to go through this. I'm just going to highlight it. The Sackett decision changed the complexity of what is considered the waters of the United States. It means that less waters are protected in Indian country and for states. If a water body does not have a continuous permanent flow to a traditional water, then it is not considered a waters of the United States, and it's not permitted under the Clean Water Act. The results are many waters in the arid Southwest, the intermittent waters, are no longer protected. The protections are going to be under tribal water plans, water protection plans, or state protection plans. Currently, there are 19 states that have non-WOTUS water protection plans, and there are some tribes that have permitting actions, but a majority of the tribes protect their waters through land use and some of their cultural use protection, the protection of monomen in the Great Lakes. Other impacts, and I'm just going to go over it quickly. The decision by the Supreme Court eliminated the Kennedy significant nexus determination. No longer is the chemical and physical and biological components are really considered under the Clean Water Act 101A goal for protecting waters of the United States. What does that mean? If it doesn't have a surface connection, it is no longer a waters of the United States. There is a ray of hope, is that, and I'll be going into a little bit more detail, is that some of the Clean Water Act permitting activities, such as the 401 certification, if it is triggered into a waters of the United States, under tribal, if you have the TAS for 401, then the other connecting waters can be considered under other laws of the tribe or other laws of the state. So the Sackett rule did not really change the other permitting actions under 401 and 402. Next slide, please. This is briefly, this is the 401 revisions that come into effect on November 27th. The highlight here is tribes can apply for treatment as a state under 401 certification without first obtaining water quality standards. This is a powerful tool that brings tribes to the table in regards to any action that of a discharge into their waters or from adjacent waters onto their reservation, and they can consider the permitting and considered under permitting actions under tribal law, under baseline water quality standards, if that is finalized. The highlights are tribes can either get TAS for the 401 certification authority, which is the full gamut of the 401, which you act as a certifying authority where you can approve a permit, deny a permit, condition a permit, or waive a permit. And so, and also act as a neighboring jurisdiction when a discharge comes onto the reservation from an upstream source. It also, EPA is required to identify a may affect determination. If that may affect determination, the tribe has 60 days to say it violates our water quality laws, our water quality standards, and they requires a hearing. So these are very powerful tools and can be used in lieu of the loss of water protection of intermittent streams and wetlands. So I'm really, the Water Council is really asking tribes to consider and look into if this is right for you under the 401 process. And EPA is providing tools for applications and hopefully down the line training for how to utilize and utilize tribal water quality standards and tribal law to implement the 401. No, that's my colleague, and I'm on a roll here.
Thanks, Ken. Well, bonjour, Ranine. I'm Nancy Schultz. I'm the Water Projects Coordinator with the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, up in Region 5, and I'm the Region 5 rep on the Water Council. And I'm going to go through a few slides talking about another initiative that is well underway right now, and that's the establishment of baseline water quality standards. Now, you are probably all well aware that of the 580-ish federally recognized Native American tribes in the U.S., only about 80 have approved TAS for their water quality standards program, and I think less than 60 have fully approved water quality standards. So this is after 30 years of water quality programs. It can be a really long haul. But the problem is, without something in place, there's essentially less protection under the Clean Water Act for waters within the exterior boundaries of the reservation. And so in that gap of Clean Water Act protection, about 20 years ago, EPA began to establish a process for setting just baseline water quality standards in Indian country to kind of fill that gap, because states do not have jurisdiction over waters on reservations in Indian country. That just kind of means there's a gap, there's a hole in the Clean Water Act protections. That baseline standards initiative back in 2001, 2002 got sidetracked. And in fact, at the time, I don't think a lot of us that were working in our tribal water programs supported that approach, had a lot of concerns about whether it was going to help tribes or just cause more confusion. But at this point, it has been reinvigorated under the Biden administration. And at this point, the National Tribal Water Council absolutely supports this, because we have seen and heard from our colleagues around in the various regions where that absence of protections can really put tribal resources at risk. So I encourage you to pay attention to how this rulemaking has been unfolding. There have been opportunities already to review and make comments. The Water Council certainly has. You can go to our website and kind of look through the archives of comments and positions that we have taken. But some of the highlights that you might want to think about are that, as Kenny pointed out, there's gaps in protections under the new rulemaking under SACIT, under the existing framework that states don't have authority to regulate waters on reservation. Having baseline water quality standards gives tribes actually a seat at the table. If there is a permit or permitted action or something that's happening that could affect your reservation waters, it requires then EPA to engage with you in consultation, gives you an opportunity to talk about the importance and significance and priorities of your resources, your particular beneficial or designated uses and cultural uses that you're trying to protect in your water programs. And there are ways to use this as kind of your first line of defense to protect those culturally important waters. But it does also offer tribes an off-ramp. If for whatever reason your program, your tribal leadership has concerns or doesn't believe that it's the right thing for your tribe, there is an option to opt out. And that's something else to consider. But I think that you all have a responsibility in your tribal water programs to understand what the intent and the purpose and the power of this baseline water quality standards initiative is. Next slide. So EPA has proposed a timeline for tribes that may want to opt out. I think they're offering 90 days after the proposed rule has been published. The final rule has been published. The Water Council has asked, requested, recommended that be extended to 180 days to give tribes enough time to kind of go through the process, to consult with your leadership, consult with your legal departments, whatever your chain of command is. It gives tribes more time to consider your options. We've also been in clear support of EPA's proposal under this baseline water quality rulemaking that there be a cultural use that is part of that baseline water quality standards. For most tribes that are seeking to protect your water resources, there are uses that are specific to your tribe and the way your tribe has always used those waters and the water resources that they support that are probably very different than what your state has done and how they've gone about their protections. We've also supported the idea of narrative criteria. Narrative criteria can be exceptionally powerful because that also means that when an action is proposed and EPA needs to consult with you, you're able to help interpret that narrative. What does that mean to be able to protect that particular use? And you can work then with EPA to define what does that mean, what kind of permit limit needs to be calculated to protect that beneficial use. And then finally, if you think about specific actions that are undertaken under the Clean Water Act, things like 404 permitting, 402 National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, water quality permitting. Again, if there's a NTWC permit that EPA issues, because of course the state can't issue that permit on tribal lands, again, you're at the table with EPA interpreting what does it mean and how can you best protect your water resources from a discharge that is controlled under a permit. Same with Section 404 dredge and fill permits. It opens up the door for actual public participation in a meaningful way, in addition to that, that formal consultation, government to government consultation, gives your tribal communities a chance to weigh in as well. And I'm going to turn this over to my colleague, Scott.
Good morning. I'm Scott Hauser. I'm the Executive Director for the Upper Snake River Tribes Foundation in Boise, Idaho. I work for 2 Region 9 tribes, Fort McDermott, Paiute, and Shoshone, and Shoshone Paiute at Duck Valley, and 2 Region 10 tribes, Shoshone Bannock at Fort Hall and Burns Paiute. For the purposes of the council, I'm a Region 10 at-large member. On December 5th of 2022, EPA proposed a rule to protect tribal reserved rights. The council has been intimately engaging with EPA on this proposed rule and submitted a lengthy comment document, which I'll be covering briefly this morning. The proposed rule recognizes that tribes hold reserved rights to natural and cultural resources, which are vital to the cultural, spiritual, and their subsistence lifeways. Most tribal reserved rights are located outside of Indian country and beyond tribal sovereignty and primacy under treatment as a state. Thus, tribes are at disproportionate risk due to this factor. EPA's proposed rule would greatly increase the protection of tribal reserve rights outside of Indian country by requiring EPA to disapprove state water quality standards that do not protect those rights. The council, we feel that EPA has taken important steps to protect tribal reserve rights by amending water quality standards regulations. Next, please. In EPA's proposed rule, they cite the Idaho example. It's a process that I was intimately involved in. And very briefly, when the state of Idaho was updating their human health water quality criteria, they at every turn ignored the requests of the 5 Idaho tribes, as well as ignored protecting their tribal reserved rights. But ultimately, due to inadequate rules and regulations of EPA had to approve those water quality standards. Thus, this is one of many reasons why this is such an important rule. We believe that while this is a rule focused on water, that there should be some expansion on language of protection of aquatic dependent resources. We just think this sets a good precedent for future proposed rules. Rather than the rule saying that EPA may promulgate newer revised standards when state water quality standards are inadequate, we believe it should be must. In brief, we support the spirit proposed in minimum requirements for water quality standard submissions, but we do have a few concerns and some proposed recommendations. For the sake of time, if we have time and anyone who's interested in those, I could go over those. Protection of tribal reserved rights is the heart of the proposed rule, and we enthusiastically endorse the EPA that EPA must protect tribal reserved rights and must designate uses in water quality standards. We do have some, we support it, but we also have some suggestions, that water quality standards must protect the unsuppressed exercise of tribal reserved rights. That was a really big issue within the Idaho process, and as I mentioned, in the proposed rule where they discuss the Idaho process, they specifically focus on unsuppressed tribal reserved rights. In concert with required tribal consultation, we also think there should be within the rule some mechanism for dispute resolution. Should the tribe or tribes get to a place where they disagree with water quality standards a state is proposing, there should be a mechanism for dispute resolution with EPA, the states, and tribes. We also advocate for the establishment of a new designated use, which would simply be called tribal reserved rights. In the state review and revision of water quality standards section, we support states be required to include tribal reserved rights in their triennial reviews. We would like to see EPA better elaborate on how states engage with tribes. When this rule is passed, we think within 2 years, all states must review their water quality standards to ensure they protect tribal reserve rights. And finally, we think it's very, very important that the rule clearly states that this proposed rule, applies to Alaska tribes as well. It's not explicitly stated in the rule. And just in conclusion, the council greatly appreciates this step that EPA is taking to embrace tribal sovereignty and tribal reserve rights. The proposed rule is very bold and would move tribes closer to a full exercise of their tribal reserve rights. And EPA's proposed rule is consistent with their groundbreaking Indian policy and would help implement the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Thank you.
It's very important that our engagement with headquarters staff and the regions and with our region EPA people, folks, great people here in Region 9, tribal consultation, the nation to nation consultation between tribes and a federal entity or the United States is at the heart of who we are as Indian people. Currently, right now, this consultation policy is going to be finalized with EPA, I believe, Kenneth, a month or so. And it highlights how tribes engage and how tribes are informed on these very important initiatives. I refer back to the trust responsibility. The trust responsibility is exercised by us as Native people. We have seen the reliance on the federal government for the trust responsibility. At times it is upheld, and most times it's just lip service, as it was said yesterday. So exercising the baseline water quality standards, exercising the 401 rule is an enhancement of your self-determination. Reach out, understand, and if it's a fit that for your tribe, then engage. Reach out to the Water Council, reach out to other tribes, ask questions. How do we implement that? Tribes want to help other tribes, and the Water Council wants to help be part of that outreach effort too. And our EPA partners are very strong in helping tribes. This administration is amazing, and I'm not saying this. I have been in this process for over 30 some years and seen the oscillations of administrations come and go. There's still, yes, we have an obligation of tribes, but the enhancement under several administrations, the Obama administration and the Biden administration, we have to take advantage of those situations in protecting our resources. So right now, I'd like to open it up for any questions that folks may have. I see one over there, and hopefully we can.
So my name is Catherine Buchanan. I'm with North Coast Native Protectors Tribal Marine Collaborative. And I've been noticing that a lot of the talk about water focuses only on surface waters. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay, so a lot of the rural communities rely on their groundwater for their drinking water. And under Safe Drinking Water Act rules, groundwater is supposed to be protected also when it's used for drinking water supplies. And yesterday I was in the presentation about another water issue in Arizona. The representative from the Environmental Quality Department in Arizona stated that The state does not have the right to regulate water quality on reservations. However, they do have the right to ensure that poisonous contaminants do not enter tribal properties. So how can we put a focus on making municipalities responsible for ensuring that proper oversight of industry does not let their contaminants come onto tribal properties? Groundwater and surface water knows no boundaries. It will travel to where it will go.
There was a recent Supreme Court decision called Maui versus Hawaii wastewater facility. And it basically was a discharge into a well that went out into the ocean. And the Supreme Court decided under that it was a pollutant, that it wasn't just a groundwater discharge into the waters of the United States, which is the ocean. And a 402 permit was required. So when there are discharges from neighboring jurisdictions into tribal reservations, the mechanisms, again, are these Clean Water Act permitting processes that require a local governance or a state governance to follow those. And if they are not, then those issues have to be raised in front of EPA, who is the oversight of both state and tribal programs. That is one way that issues are.
No, that's a great example. I don't know if it applies to the situation that you're concerned about necessarily, but the Maui decision absolutely establishes that if a pollutant is being discharged into groundwater, that immediately or functionally equivalent into surface water, if it daylights into surface water, it requires the protections of a Clean Water Act 402 permit. Now, there's a whole lot of other scenarios where you can be concerned about groundwater pollutants and affecting your drinking water supplies. Maybe it stays in the ground. Clean Water Act may or may not apply. It may or may not be your most effective tool, but I think if you've got 106 money and you're able to do monitoring, you can do groundwater monitoring under 106. Monitoring data can be exceptionally important when you're trying to advocate for the protection of your resources. You may or may not have the resources to get that information, but information is powerful. There are also potential protections under the Safe Drinking Water Act too, and the establishment of groundwater and source water protection zones, et cetera. Always a bad assumption. No. I think you're preaching to the choir. I think all of us have probably experienced that kind of frustration and a feeling of inability to address your problems. All I can say is you need to be creative. You need to forge partnerships, perhaps with other tribes or intertribal agencies, or even potentially other federal agencies. Maybe BIA has some funding. Maybe USGS has some funding and can partner and help you again, gain the information you need then to make substantive comments when there are those opportunities, and to lean on, sometimes it requires leaning on state agencies to consider. There's no easy answer to what you raise. That's a perfect example of the challenges we all face in different ways working for our tribal governments.
Hi, my name is Aya, and I am a council member for NEJAC, the National Environmental Justice Advisory Council, which advises the Office of Environmental Justice at the EPA on some of these issues. I totally agree with the previous question asker, who is frustrated with the state level, you know, where the EPA might promulgate some rules, but the states don't implement it. We've seen it at the NEJAC level many, many times. I have two questions. NEPA famously, you know, gives procedural due process, but it really doesn't deliver on the substantive, you know, results. Sorry. You know, even if the communities are heard, they don't need to actually implement any changes in the final plans. And so I'm wondering, in the proposed rules, what are some of the substantive guarantees that are built in? I saw a lot of asks in the comments, but I was wondering, you know, what we can rely on to deliver. And the second question was, when the administration changes, what are some of the safeguards that the tribes have? Thank you.
I can try to start to answer some of those questions. I'll give you an example. Our tribe, the Fond du Lac Band up in northeastern Minnesota, battling mines constantly in our headwaters, you know, affecting waters of the reservation, affecting waters in our ceded territories. We were engaged in the environmental review process for 10 years, and then it moved into permitting. And because we were a downstream tribe that had federally approved water quality standards, we were able to assert our authorities under Section 401A2, a downstream water quality jurisdictional authority. We were able to require that hearing with the Corps in their issuance of the 404 permit. We were able to make our case based upon the law, based upon the science, and EPA agreed with our determination. And the Corps had no choice but to revoke that permit because EPA and the tribes were the experts on the water quality issues for tribal waters. The same held true for a 402 permit that was being issued for that same project. Again, our downstream water quality authorities gave us that standing and that ability to challenge a bad permitting decision. So if we think about the 401 rule, and the ability for a tribe to apply for TAS for 401 certification authority, even if you don't have standards, it does give you a specific legal standing to challenge. That's only one example, though. There's so many other ways that, you know, we find ourselves challenged by bad governance, the lack of follow through on the part, and the political. There's no way around it. There's a lot of political pressure that goes against our abilities to protect our waters. And so I don't have a lot of easy answers. It's just that you need to take advantage of the tools that are there.
Thank you. I just wanted to also add that at the regional level, the EPA is organizing and hiring and trying to strengthen the regional organizing. So I think to the extent that, you know, the national EPA isn't reaching the states, I think there's efforts to organize at the regional offices. Thanks.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify something that I'm not clear on. The baseline water quality standards program that's just now being rolled out, if we're already enrolled in like 106, do we have to disenroll with the baseline water quality standards within the 90-day period, or are we automatically?
No, your 106 authority gives you the ability to monitor and protect your waters, right? To provide capacity, to staff up. The baseline water quality standards is essentially a way of filling in Section 303C. That's the water quality standards part of the Clean Water Act. So your 106 program is in support of protecting whatever the water quality standards are. Without tribal water quality standards or without baseline water quality standards, you probably have targets or benchmarks or things that you use to assess when you do your monitoring. But those baseline water quality standards are intended to fill in a formal way so that when a permitting decision, a federal action is taking place, that there is something that EPA can turn to that can establish those levels of protection for physical, chemical, biological parameters that will protect the important traditional cultural uses that are important to your tribe. So the baseline standards don't have any effect on your 106 program. Your 106 program is how you gather the information that can then be used when you have consultation with EPA over a proposed permit down the road. Does that help?
All right, I just got notified that we're running out of time, so thank you all. But I have one more quick slide just to show you, just so that you could see that we do have, the Water Council has also a working group called a Tribal PFAS Working Group. And so the Water Council is the lead in this work group. And 4 other tribal partnership groups participate in this as well. So I just wanted to show you 2 of the materials that were developed by the Tribal PFAS Working Group. And then the other one on the far right was published by the National Tribal Water Council. It's a guidebook. And let me see, there's one. Of course, you can go onto our website to get the electronic copy and download it, but we also have some hard copies of it if you would like to grab one. They're on this table over here next to Elena. Elena is our project assistant, and so feel free to grab one from there. And then also, if you would like to sign up for our newsletter, we do have a monthly newsletter as well, and the sign-up sheet is on that at that table as well. So please feel free to sign up over there. Just need your name and your email address and the tribe you work for. That's all we have. And if you have any questions that you didn't get to ask, we didn't get to, go ahead and email me or let's see, email me at that address up there. Thank you.
They let anybody out of the cage.